The wind pushed against her coat like a memory that didn't want her back. Malin Cord stepped out of the rental car and looked up at the weather-worn arch above the gate. St. Avena's Hall for Girls, Estate, 1873. The sign swung gently in the breeze, its gold leaf faded, like the lies the school had been built on. She hadn't seen this place in 22 years. Not since 2002, when she'd been pulled out without warning just 2 weeks after her roommate. Elira Vale vanished into the night. No explanation, no funeral, just whispers that she ran away. But Malin knew better, because on that final night, Elira had whispered, "Stay awake tonight. If I don't come back, remember the smell. Lavender, salt and warm skin." Now, in 2024, Malin was 31 and contracted as a historical archivist. The school board had hired her to catalog what remained before demolition crews arrived next month. She took the job for the paycheck, but part of her, the part she never talked about, had taken it for something else. Closure. Or maybe confession. The grounds looked almost identical. Cracked stone paths, peeling paint on the dormitory shutters. The tall chapel tower still leaned slightly, as though ashamed of what it had seen. What had they seen? What had she missed? She walked past the old fencing, where fate had missing. Posters still hung like ghosts. The faces were smeared by weather, but one stopped her cold. Lyra. Sharp eyes, long black hair, lips slightly parted as if just about to speak. And next to her, 2 more posters, different names, same date, same disappearance. Her hand trembled as she reached for the rusted lockbox on the chapel steps and signed in. The on-site manager, some distant cousin of the school's founder, barely looked up from his coffee. "Don't go into the West Annex," he muttered. "Mold hazard." Malin didn't answer. She already knew where she was going. Inside, the building smelled like mildew, ink, and the kind of silence that hums. The main hallway stretched out like a spine, lined with old honor plaques and class photos that stared blankly back. She passed the 2002 photo. There she was, Malin Cord, 2nd row, 3rd from the left. Stiff posture, unsure eyes, and next to her, Elira, arms loosely folded, gaze slightly turned toward Malin instead of the camera. Her throat tightened. In her gloved hand, Malin clutched her leather satchel and moved toward the 2nd-floor dormitory wing. Her boots creaked over wood warped from years of moisture. The corridor still carried a faint scent she couldn't place at first. Then it struck her. Lavender. Old, faint, but there, room to be. She pushed the door open slowly. The hinges didn't squeal. They groaned like the room itself remembered. What had happened to narrow beds, dusty drapes, a broken lamp? It was like no one had touched it since that night. Malin crossed the room and touched the left pillow, Elira's side. The fabric crumbled slightly under her fingers. A single black hair still clung to the edge of the sheet. And underneath the mattress, a thin bump. She hesitated, then reached under. A folded photograph of her and Elira, side by side in front of the chapel, both smiling, both wearing matching black uniforms, and on the back, scrawled in pencil, "For the day we're both free." Malin's pulse quickened. She sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself remember. The summer storm, the soft hum of Elira singing in Latin at night, the late-night whispers. The moment they shared a blanket during a blackout, Elira's fingers brushing her collarbone, her breath warm, her lips nearly brushing Malin's. They never spoke of it again. But Malin never forgot the way it made her stomach twist with something between fear and longing. Back then, no one talked about feelings like that, especially not in St. Avena's. Especially not if you were a girl sharing a room with another girl who made your heartbeat strange. That night, when Elira vanished, Malin had waited until dawn, pretended to be asleep when the nuns came, said nothing when questioned. But in her dreams, she always heard the same thing. Remember the smell. A sudden creak from the hallway jolted her out of memory. She turned. No one there. Just the corridor stretching out, shadows touching walls that hadn't known light in years. She stood, slid the photo into her coat pocket, and walked toward the chapel. The old wooden doors loomed tall and silent. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight from the stained glass above. The moment her hand touched the door handle, a faint sound echoed inside, A soft, girlish hum. Low and familiar. Illyra's voice, or a memory of it. She stepped back, her breath caught. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The next morning, Malin returned to the chapel just as fog curled around the grounds like fingers. Dew clung to her coat as she walked silently past the missing posters, still nailed to the outer fencing. One fluttered in the breeze. Illyra's eyes stared back, too alive to be forgotten. The key the site manager had given her clinked in her hand. It wasn't for the chapel, but she didn't need one. The doors weren't locked. No one cared anymore, not about what was left, and certainly not about what had been hidden. Inside, the chapel was cold, but not lifeless. Dust floated in sunbeams, slicing through stained glass saints with cracked halos. The pews stood in perfect silence, each row like a secret never confessed. She walked slowly down the center aisle, boots thudding softly against worn tile. The altar loomed ahead, ornate, but hollow. A faded crimson cloth still draped over it, stained darker in patches where candle wax had melted and pooled. Malin stopped. She remembered kneeling here once, Illyra beside her, both pretending to pray. But Illyra had whispered instead, "There's something behind it." I heard them. I followed. The sound after lights out. Back then, Malin had brushed it off as one of Illyra's dreamy ramblings. But now, in this ruined silence, it didn't seem so far-fetched. She stepped behind the altar. The wall there was different, plaster over stone, unlike the rest of the chapel, and at the center, a wooden crucifix mounted directly into the plaster. She touched it. It shifted. Her breath caught. A soft click followed, and the entire frame nudged loose like a lever. Slowly, carefully, she pulled. The panel gave way with a groan of old hinges, revealing a narrow stone corridor descending into shadow. The air that escaped was heavy, damp. It smelled of mildew, dust, and lavender. The same scent, still alive after all these years. She raised her flashlight and stepped in. The passageway led downward at a slight angle. The air grew colder with each step. The walls narrowed until she had to duck slightly. At the end was a small chamber 8 feet across, stone from floor to ceiling, with a low ceiling that pressed down like gilt. The room was empty. Almost. In the far corner sat a small chest, covered in a faded silk scarf. Dust had settled on it, but the scarf's edges still shimmered faintly violet and silver. Illyra's favorite colors. Malin knelt, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Her gloved hands brushed the dust away before carefully lifting the lid. Inside, a small leather-bound diary, edges worn with time. A crimson lipstick tube, capped. A few burnt paper fragments, their words singed and incomplete. She picked up the diary and opened to the first page. "If you're reading this, it means they never let me leave. I was always here, watching." Illyra Vale, March 2000 to Malin's. Fingers trembled as she turned the page. "They told me to repent, to change, to stop inviting confusion." That's what they called it when I touched Malin's hand too long, or when I brushed her cheek while she slept. They called it confusion, but it felt more like clarity. Malin stopped reading. Her breath hitched. She remembered that night. A storm had knocked out the power. They'd huddled beneath the same blanket, sharing warmth, but also something more. Electric. Illyra's fingers had brushed the side of her face. Malin hadn't pulled away. They never spoke of it, but both had felt it. She turned another page. "They said I was leading her astray, but I wasn't. I was just trying to be near her, just trying to feel something that wasn't cold." A tear slid down Malin's cheek before she realized it. The room felt suddenly tighter. She stood slowly, still clutching the diary, then noticed something on the wall behind the chest, scratched faintly into the stone. I watched her leave. She looked back. I stayed. Malin backed away. The cold had sunk into her bones. But something else had to. A weight, a pull, a calling. She climbed back up the corridor and returned to the chapel. The stained glass no longer seemed sacred. It felt like it had been watching her. She stepped out into the gray daylight, still clutching the diary to her chest. Back in her temporary cottage, she placed it gently on the table. The lavender scent still clung to her clothes. She stared at the page again. It felt more like clarity. She pressed the scarf to her face. It still carried warmth, or maybe memory. That night, she dreamt of Illyra. Not crying, not lost, just standing in the chapel, smiling faintly and whispering her name, Malin, not in fear, but in something that felt like love. The diary sat open on the table like it had been waiting for years. Its pages curled at the corners, but the ink hadn't faded. If anything, the words felt sharper now, like they'd only just been written. Malin stirred her coffee absently, her eyes fixed on Elira's looping handwriting. The scent of the violet silk scarf still lingered in the cottage air, lavender, skin, and something sweetly burned, like candle wax and memory. She turned to the next entry. March 17, 2002. They called me to the chapel again. Said it was part of my correction. I sat across from Dean Avril. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Her eyes were knives. She said I was confusing Malin, that my presence was a spiritual disruption. I wanted to laugh. Confusing? What's confusing about the way she held me that night when the storm made the windows scream? About how her breath stuttered when I kissed the edge of her jaw? Malin's breath caught. She remembered. That night hadn't just been warmth, it had been electric, her pulse pounding, her skin flushed. Elira had moved closer under the blanket. They'd shared heat and something far more dangerous. Her hand had trembled when she touched Elira's face, but she hadn't pulled away. The next day, Malin had found Elira gone, and no one would speak her name again. That afternoon, Malin returned to the chapel. The sun cast long lines of stained color across the pews, but the air was heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. She walked slowly past the altar again and into the narrow stairway behind the cross. Each step felt deeper than stone, like it sank into something emotional. In the small chamber where she'd found the diary, she now noticed something she hadn't seen before: a white lily, dried and pressed between floor stones. Its petals had yellowed, but the scent still clung faintly. Elira had loved lilies. She once said they smelled like secrets and goodbyes. Malin crouched and touched the edge of the flower, and a sudden wave of memory crashed over her. Elira standing in the window, wearing her chapel robe, hair braided with a violet ribbon, saying, "If I vanish, don't believe what they tell you." My heart never ran, it stayed. The weight of it was unbearable. That evening, back in the cottage, Malin tried to read more, but her body was trembling. Her skin felt as sensitive. Every word Elira had written buzzed under her flesh. March 22nd, 2002. They made me sleep in the chapel basement. Said it would cleanse me. Said I'd stop feeling that way. But they don't understand. You don't stop feeling desire. You just learn to bury it deeper. And I've buried everything, except her name. I whisper it at night. Malin, 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 like a prayer, like a promise. Malin closed the book. Her hand hovered over the pages. Trembling, she walked to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. Her lips were pale, her cheeks flushed. She looked like someone who had been touched without being touched. Something was happening to her. Elira's words weren't just memories. They were pulling something out of her, something she'd buried deep after 2002. Something warm, forbidden, real. She went to bed with the scarf under her pillow. She didn't expect to sleep, but she did, and she dreamed. In the dream, the chapel glowed with candlelight. Elira stood barefoot near the altar. Her chapel robe opened slightly at the collarbone, revealing soft skin, and eyes filled with something between sorrow and longing. "You're late," Elira said, voice like silk on skin. "I thought you were gone," Malin whispered. "I stayed." Elira stepped forward. Her fingers brushed Malin's cheek, trailing down her jaw. "Do you remember how we used to lie awake and listen to the wind?" Malin nodded, throat tight. "And how your heart raced when I touched your arm. Like this?" She slid her fingers down Malin's forearm, slowly, gently. The air between them felt charged, sacred. "You were the only warmth I ever knew," Elira whispered. Their lips met gently at first, a breath shared, then more. And just as Malin pulled her tighter, the dream snapped. She woke gasping. The scarf had fallen to the floor, but the scent still hung in the room. Thick and real and impossible. Malin sat up, heart hammering, sweat clinging to her skin. Outside, the night wind howled faintly. She reached for the diary again, unable to stop herself. March 28, 2002. They say I must repent to leave, but I won't, because I wasn't wrong. Wanting her was the only true thing I ever felt in this place. They can make me kneel, make me sleep in the dark, but they can't erase what I saw in her eyes, not unless they erase me completely. A single tear slipped down Malin's cheek. She didn't wipe it. She whispered into the stillness, I never stopped remembering you. The wind outside shifted. Something tapped against the window. Not a branch, a rhythm. 3 taps. Then 2. A pattern Elira used to use in the dark when she snuck in after hours. Their secret code. A knock that meant, I'm still here. Malin turned slowly toward the window. But no one was there. Only the reflection of herself flushed. Breathless and alive in a way she hadn't been in 22 years. Asterisk by morning. The knock at the window still haunted her. Malin hadn't slept. The diary remained open beside her coffee mug, its edges curling from damp air. The scent of the scarf, that haunting mix of lavender and heat, now clung to her skin. She hadn't imagined the tapping. It had followed the rhythm. Only she and Elira had used someone, or something, wanted her to remember. But now, she needed facts. She dressed in silence and drove to the Morning Ridge Town Archive, a brutalist brick building that smelled of mold and toner. Inside, a gray-haired woman named Amina Trost sat behind a dusty desk, her glasses perched low on her nose. You said you're cataloging Solmere Hall, Amina asked. Uninterested. Malin slid a copy of a yearbook across the desk. 2002, Elira Vale, missing. Amina's eyes flicked over the page. Oh, that one. We heard rumors. They said she ran away. Strange things happened at that school. We were glad when it shut down. Was she the only girl who vanished that year? Malin asked carefully. Amina hesitated. There was another girl, expelled, no press, no obituary, just gone. She shuffled through a drawer and pulled out a faded yellow folder. Malin leaned closer. The label read, Student, no Eliran, withdrawn March 2002. Inside were only 2 pages. A disciplinary note marked unsuitable influence on peers. A sealed record with no photograph, no signature, just a student ID. #311C. At the bottom, do not re-enroll. Refer to Program R. Program R, Malin asked. Amina frowned. No idea. I've never seen that before. Malin's fingers tingled. That night she'd found Elira's diary. She'd seen the letter fragments, burned, almost unreadable. But one of them had the phrase, our candidates must be isolated immediately. She returned to the cottage in a daze, her mind racing. That evening, she reopened the diary. April 1st, 2002. They moved me downstairs again. This time, they said it was for my own safety. But it's punishment. For Noel, for what they think we did together. But we didn't. Not really. It was Malin. Always Malin. I think they hated that more. That I wanted someone who didn't fit their narrative. Malin's heart clenched. They'd punished Elira for not choosing the right girl. Jealousy, that was what it had always been. They couldn't control desire, so they erased it. She flipped. Another page. There's someone else down here. I hear breathing when I sleep. I think it's Noel. But no, this girl doesn't speak. She just watches. She's behind the wall, I'm sure of it. I heard tapping last night. 3 then 2. Not our rhythm, hers, whoever she is. She's been here longer than anyone. Malin stopped reading. A third girl. Not Elira. Not Noel. Someone else, unspoken, unnamed. Suddenly, the knock at the window didn't seem like Elira's anymore. It wasn't their code. It was someone else's. Driven by unease, Malin returned to the chapel just before dusk. The sun hovered low behind the stained glass, casting long, blood-colored rays. She bypassed the altar and descended into the hidden room once more. The air felt tighter now, damp with breath. The diary trembled slightly in her satchel, or maybe that was just her hands. She examined the stone wall where she'd found the lily. She tapped gently, once, twice. Hollow. The section to the left echoed back. She pressed her palm against the surface. The stones felt colder than the rest, not just cold, but watched. She leaned her ear against the wall and heard it. Breathing. Slow, raspy, in and out. She stepped back. There was no one left in the school that was there. That night, back in the cottage, she couldn't sit still. She set the diary on the kitchen table and spread out her notes. Elira Vale. Disappeared April 2000 to Noel Iran. Expelled March 2000 to student R. Unknown program R. Redacted. From Record's third girl. The one Illyra called the one who watches and beneath it all. She wrote in ink. They erased her name, but they didn't erase her presence. She turned back to the diary one last time. April 5, 2002. I think they want me to vanish. They say silence is a virtue, but they don't understand. Silence isn't empty. Silence is a girl behind the wall, watching, waiting, wanting someone to say her name, the one she never got to choose. Malin closed the diary with shaking hands. She didn't sleep that night. But the breathing continued. Right outside her window. It was just past midnight when Malin returned to the chapel. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't left a note, only grabbed her satchel, stuffed with the diary, her flashlight, gloves, and the violet scarf still warm from her dreams. The breathing hadn't stopped. It had followed her even in daylight, shallow, steady, like someone waiting beneath the floorboards. The fog clung low round the chapel like it was trying to smother the truth. Her boots crunched softly over gravel as she passed through the warped wooden doors inside. The stained glass saints were shadows. Their once colorful eyes were now pools of black glass. Watching, judging, or maybe warning, Malin made her way toward the altar. She didn't hesitate this time. She moved behind it, lifted the crucifix, and pulled open the panel leading to the hidden stairway. The cold air that rose to greet her felt heavier than before, wetter, dense, like memory rotting in the dark. As she descended, her flashlight flickered twice before catching. The underground chamber welcomed her like a tomb. But now she was looking for something more. She traced her fingers along the left side of the wall. The part that had echoed. She pressed harder. It gave slightly, a hairline crack. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the small crowbar she kept for archive crates. It slipped easily into the seam. The wall moaned as it gave. Behind it, darkness. But not just a crawl space. A room. She stepped through. The air changed. It was warmer. The space was barely larger than a closet. Stone walls stained with age. The floor lined with rotted wood. A single child's mattress lay in the corner, its fabric torn. Next to it, a melted candle stub. The wax pooled in what once may have been a dish or an offering, and scratched into every inch of stone was a single phrase over and over. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Some were faint. Others dug so deep they'd bled the stone white. Malin's breath hitched. She stepped back, nearly stumbling into the wall. That's when she saw it. A small envelope, wedged between the mattress and the wall. She picked it up carefully, on the front, in Illyra's unmistakable handwriting. If she finds you, tell her I never forgot. Malin peeled it open. Inside, a folded letter, dated April 7, 2002, the day Illyra disappeared. They told me I'd be free if I told the truth, but they didn't mean that kind of truth. They meant the kind that erases people. They meant silence. But I can't silence you. I can't silence what I felt in the dark when your fingers found mine beneath the blanket. When we shared breath instead of words, they said love wasn't allowed. Then maybe this was something else, something louder. If they take me, I'll leave you a piece of me here, in the scent, in the stone, in the silence. You'll know it when you feel it. You always did. Tears slipped silently down Malin's cheeks. She could barely breathe. Her hand tightened around the scarf, now clinging to her wrist like a vine. Then, a sound. Not breathing. Footsteps. Above her. Someone was inside the chapel. She doused her flashlight. Everything went black. Her breath caught in her throat as the footsteps moved, slow, deliberate, just above the altar. Then the soft groan of the floorboards, then silence again. Malin pressed herself against the cold wall. Whoever was there didn't call out, didn't move again, only waited. Like the girl behind the wall once had. After what felt like forever, the footsteps retreated. She didn't move for minutes. When she finally climbed out of the crawl space and resealed the broken wall, she felt different, like some part of her had been carved open and replaced. By the time she reached the surface, again the chapel was empty, but a new item had been placed on the altar, a white lily, freshly cut. Its petals wed. No vase, no tag, just a flower, and a message. Malin approached slowly. Beneath the lily, scratched into the altar's wood, She never had a name, but she had a heart. Malin stared down, her hand trembling. She whispered aloud, Elira, Noelle, and the one they buried in silence. I remember you, and somewhere, deep beneath the chapel, in that stone room lined with desperate scratches, the silence finally sighed. 3 days after the lily appeared on the altar, Malin uploaded the full story. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't redact names. She didn't soften any parts. She titled the post. She didn't run. She waited in the walls, and then she hit publish. Within hours, it went viral. Former students began commenting. Some remembered Elira. Some remembered hearing rumors about the basement. A few remembered another girl, not by name, but by presence, quiet, pale, always sketching, sat in the back, never spoke. And then came the reporters, the podcast producers, the cold case investigators, and eventually the school board. Their response was mechanical, polite. We acknowledge archival materials have emerged involving former students. We are committed to a full review. The current board bears no connection to leadership from 2002. It was a carefully phrased shrug, but Malin wasn't interested in their apologies. She was looking for one thing only, the truth no one dared put into words. 2 days later, she received an anonymous message. You should stop digging. Some names were never meant to be remembered. Malin stared at it, then replied without hesitation. Then why is her voice louder than ever? She didn't get a response. At dawn the next morning, Malin returned to the chapel one last time. A light rain fell, slicking the stones beneath her boots. In her satchel, she carried the diary, a new plaque, and a candle, nothing else. Inside, the chapel was silent, but it no longer felt empty. She descended once more into the stone chamber beneath the altar. The candle flickered as she entered the crawl space, now clean, cleared, but not forgotten. She knelt near the old cot. The name hadn't been there before, but it was now 3 letters melted into the stone in wax. Lum, not a full name, but a beginning, a whisper of light. Malin placed her candle beside it, letting the wax pool naturally. Then she stood and walked to the main chapel wall. From her satchel, she removed a weatherproof plaque wrapped in linen. She peeled off the backing and fixed it to the center stone. The words were simple, in memory of the unnamed. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She waited. And now we remember. As Malin stood there, staring at the words, the wind shifted through the broken stained glass. The scent of lavender passed through again. Not sharp this time. Warm, soft, like skin after sleep. She whispered, Elira. I found her. Somewhere behind her, the wood creaked. But no one was there. She didn't need them to be. Because now, she wasn't hiding anymore either. That evening, Malin sat by her laptop, scanning dozens of messages. Among them was one from an unfamiliar name, Riva Iran. The subject, she was my sister. Noelle never came home. Our parents told me she'd been sent away. But I never believed it. Your post, the diary pages, the wax writing, that's her. And I think the girl behind the wall was someone she tried to help. She used to say, the quietest ones carry the heaviest weight. Thank you. Please don't stop telling it. Malin pressed her fingers to her lips. For the first time in years, she cried openly. Not just for Elira, not just for Noelle. But for the girl who never got a name, the one who stayed. A week later, state authorities opened an inquiry. The demolition was halted permanently. A preservation grant was issued to turn Solmere Hall into a memorial archive. For the girls, for the silence, for what had been done in the dark. Under the veil of discipline and purity, Malin was asked to lead the transformation. She agreed, but only on one condition. The silent one gets her own space, not just a line in a report. A room, a name, a candle always burning. They agreed. 1 year later, the chapel stood quiet, but not abandoned. A new plaque had been added to the wall behind the altar, beneath the original Latin inscription. A new phrase had been carved, Lumen in Tenebrae, light in the darkness, and, beneath it, a name, Luma Vale, 199-2002 unconfirmed beloved. Buried, remembered. A name Malin chose. She didn't have one, she told the board. So I gave her the one she carried in silence, And on certain days, when the light filters just right through the broken glass, it falls in the shape of a girl, hand to the wall, eyes closed, listening. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to, because now someone finally heard her.